According to Yah's timing, we're right in the middle of all that is supposed to be happening. The key is not to get upset at all that is happening. Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10 Minute Torah, day 3 of Eikev at the end. And we are now in chapter 8 of Deuteronomy, or Devarim, and let's begin with verse 1. Guard to do every command which I command you today, that you might live and shall increase and go in and shall possess the land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness. Notice this: to humble you, prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. And he humbled you and let you suffer hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Yahweh. He intentionally allowed this mass of people get hungry. Now, any parent that would testify or acknowledge that they intentionally allowed their child to go hungry to the point of desperation, no one would think very much of that parent. Or if that parent allowed the water supply or hydration supply for a child to dry up and let them get very, very thirsty before they provided more water, that parent would probably be behind bars somewhere. Yet, Yah says, I intentionally brought you out here to put you to the test. Now, we're not talking about children, although children would have been involved. But he allowed this nation in formation, this nation in the formulation period, to experience hardship, hard hardship. When we're talking about several million people without a water supply, it doesn't take a day or two and things can get very, very desperate, because just to catch up would require an enormous amount of water, an incredible amount of water. To feed such a people, now they had flocks, they had herds, they had means of putting something in their bellies. But again, to feed a few million people would have required a lot of butchering of their flocks and herds. It wouldn't have taken long, and they would have exhausted those. So what do? Well, Yah says here, you should remember that, number one, I led you. I intentionally directed your path to each location, and I allowed you to be humbled to prove you, to know what is in your heart. Now, a couple of thoughts here. One, the title of the Torah portion at the end, Eikev, not only is to give you an understanding of the chronological events that are being discussed, but it's very easy, and the rabbis agree with this as well, it's very easy to understand that this is a reference to perhaps the last days. Secondly, it says to know what was in your heart. Yah already knows the heart. Yah knows our thoughts before we think them. He knows our prayers before we pray them. He's numbered our days before our days have initiated. So without any lack of knowledge, why does he need to prove our hearts? Well, to prove what is in your heart, whether you would guard his commands or not. That's for us. I've said this many times, I'll say it once more. You don't know who you really are until you have been pushed and stretched, stressed out, exhausted of your resources. Any of us that have been in great need at some point and wondered, how are we going to make this happen? It's only then do you realize whether or not you're going to trust, or in your desperation, you're going to try to manufacture something that is ill-advised. Now, when you get into a bad place, and I would dare say that most of us have been in such a bad place. By that I mean you are emotionally worn out, or mentally exhausted, or financially tapped out, however it manifested. Are you going to panic, or are you going to trust? And God put this people in this desperate situation to allow them to know. He already knew not only the desperation of their need, he already had the provision of their need in store. Moshe, go strike the rock. A river of water will flow back to the people, and it will meet their thirst. Moshe, tell the people to go out in the morning, and bread will be on the ground. I will give them something to eat. Moshe, tell them to go out and gather quail. And they gathered quail till they choked on it. So Yah can do whatever needs to be done. There is no shortage of resource in him. The question is, are we going to trust him for provision from this inexhaustible resource? It's not as though Yah says, I've got this much on the shelf, and I think it's going to be enough. We'll just see. No, there's storehouse after storehouse of provision, theoretically, figuratively speaking. Yah knows all of the need of his people, and it's inexhaustible what he can do in our behalf. The question is, do we trust him to do that in our behalf? And so he humbled you, let you suffer hunger, fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to teach you, man does not live by bread alone, but by the words of Yah. The test was not mean-spirited. The trials are not without reason or purpose. Whatever you go through, whenever that takes place, pushing you and shoving you and stretching you is intended to also bring you into the classroom and teach you and to bring revelation to you. This people would have never known how miraculous bread could show up 6 days out of the week and enough on the sixth day to get them through the seventh day and have plenty. It was to teach them that Yeshua is the bread of life that has been given to them. They ate the bread. They didn't necessarily discern the revelation. Even in Yeshua's day, they followed him for food, looking for another free lunch. But when he revealed himself to them as manna from heaven, the bread of life, they balked at it in most respects, most of them did, and failed to understand. So then it says here that you need to learn about the word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. I find that interesting as a reference, because I know someone else that was like Israel, pushed out into the wilderness, and though not for 40 years, but for 40 days, and was tested. Was Yeshua placed in the wilderness, fasting and hungering, then being tempted by Hasatan himself? Was that arranged by Yah to allow Yeshua to suffer hunger and thirst to prove what was in his heart? We focus so much sometimes on the divinity, the deity of Yeshua, we forget the humanity. And the physical being of Yeshua needed to be pushed enough that he relied on the Word and stood on the Word in order to get through the fulfillment of this trial. But as he has suffered for us in our behalf, we also can endure with him and enjoy the supply of God's resource on the other side. Hopefully, I'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, shalom.